Hello and welcome to the May 6th edition of the Cluster API provider AWS Office Hours, a subproject of SIG Cluster Lifecycle. If you have any items that you want to cover, please go ahead and add them to the agenda now, and also go ahead and add yourself to the attending list too. I am dropping the link to the agenda doc in the chat for anybody who's attending in real time. To start with, we were able to cut the 0.2.1 release this past Friday. Thank you, Chuck. So we have that out there now. That's mostly just bug fix release, but it does address issues that people were definitely hitting with the 0.2.0 release. And then next, because we do have some changes coming in that are going to impact tagging of the resources, we are starting to track our 0.3.0 release. And so far, pull request number 706 is the only item that I have for tracking there. So if there are any other issues or pull requests that you think need to be addressed for 0.3.0, please go ahead and bring those to our attention. All right.
Are we releasing after 706?
Maybe.
Okay. I wasn't sure what the plan was. It's just that master is going to track release 3 or 0.3.
Yeah, I didn't really have a timeline specifically for the release. I don't know if that is something that Seth or one of the other folks from New Relic had in mind, because I think that was affecting them more.
Yeah, we're running a forked build right now. We're not coupled to the release cycle, so whatever makes more sense for the project, I think is fine by us.
Okay, great. So we'll track 706. If anything else comes up, in the short term, we can probably roll that in as well. Figure, let's look to have a stable build within a few weeks, and then we can go there. We can make the call probably at the next bi-weekly meeting on whether to release or not. All right.
Yeah, cool.
Next item, and also over to Chuck for an update about the end-to-end tests.
Yes, we finally get this fixed. So the periodics are passing, and I'm hoping the other one will be passing too. That was a lot of email back and forth with the CNCF, so I'm glad that's done. And then I've also got the next item here. Oh, I guess maybe, no, never mind. Yeah, the next item here, image promoter work. I will be working with Harish, who is trying to get more involved with the upstream stuff, to be doing some of the image promoter work for both. I'm hoping he can also kind of get that going for CAPI or Cluster API, but it'd be good to have in both repositories as well.
Yeah, I had a question for you about the end-to-end tests.
Yeah, go for it.
So what's the scope of those that is intended to be covered? So sorry, 706 fixes an issue with load balancer integrations from the cluster API. Would that be in or out of scope of those end-to-end tests? Should I add a part to that PR that validates it?
No, so right now it's not. I think it's a very minimal end-to-end test. It's mostly just create the cluster, spin down the cluster. I think we'll probably have to have a plan going forward about what is or not in scope for those. And there's a whole bunch of issues that kind of cover what we're thinking, what people have been thinking over the past few months as these have been developed. But it's not super important at this moment. Just so long as it works, as long as we can write tests and it does work.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah, so one of the things that we definitely want to do for the end-to-end tests over time is we want to extend them to do full conformance tests so that we know that we're actually spinning up a conformant cluster. But that still would not validate the load balancer test. So I think that is definitely something that we should think about adding as a separate kind of EDE test in there. And I'm not sure about the framework that we're using, but it should facilitate adding kind of a second parallel test. If it doesn't, we need to address that. All right. Vince, you have the next item for caching AWS sessions.
Yeah, so I opened a PR, which shouldn't be merged like this, but during some tests like last week, I've noticed that after creating like 2 or 3 machines, the fourth one wouldn't come up, and that was because the AWS calls were actually hanging. We used to create one, well, like right now in master, we actually do create one session for each machine that comes up, or like even if we want a load balancer, we create a new session. And the AWS SDK doesn't actually like say that this shouldn't be done, but it says when you can, you should cache the session. And going in the session code, it actually like shows that like it does a lot of like backend calls. For example, when you assume a role and to like kind of get the credentials. That's for IAM roles. But when it also you have static credentials, AWS will actually block you when you the same source API makes multiple calls with the same, or like multiple sessions with the same AWS access key. So for that, like we'll need something that like caches these sessions, and we'll need to make sure like to understand how like that works for like credentials that can expire, or for example, like if like we want to have at some point the AWS provider to handle multiple credentials. I don't know if that's in scope for now, but for now, like we can probably just cache on the endpoint or region name. But if anybody knows more about it, please do let me know.
So what we did in Valero is so we have a single pod that's running that will operate on a single set of credentials, and so it creates one session and uses that for the lifespan of the pod. And as far as I know, the Go SDK for AWS will handle refreshing any credentials that are temporary, that are like the STS tokens. So I would say that until and if we need to handle multiple accounts or multiple sets of credentials, then we can create a single session per region probably, or whatever the delineating factor is. But I wouldn't think that we need to have some crazy caching going on. It's really just make a session and use it everywhere.
All right, so maybe the code that we have today in the PR actually would work fine for now, and then we can revisit later.
Yeah, and I also think we should make sure that those sessions don't get closed underneath the cache. So we should, if there is any code that where we explicitly close sessions, we should remove that.
I don't think we do close session as far as I know, so there might be the other problem. That's good to know. That's it.
All right. Next up, node draining.
Yeah, so I don't think Dominic is on the call. I was just kind of going over that with PR about some of the node draining, and I was just curious, is if the plan for that is something that would move up into CAPI at some point, and if, you know, how kind of in the timeline that transitions like that would work.
Yeah, so in the short term, until we have all of the work streams refining the data model and the lifecycle management and everything, if you want to cordon and drain right now, the best way to do it is per provider. And longer term, when we have all of the refinements in place, then anything related to lifecycle management, which includes draining, should live in a centralized, I guess what I would say, a reference implementation for managing that. And then we'd be able to swap implementations out which is really the model that we're going for V1 Alpha 2 and beyond. But for right now, it's up to the providers to do it if they want to.
So there's already some code in CAPI to do this today, but it only works if the node reference is set, which only happens today if the cluster API objects are running in the same cluster as the node objects. So only for basically a self-managed cluster. So the only way that we can do remote object references right now to nodes is in the provider implementations today.
Cool, got it. That answers that. I think I also have the next item. I believe maybe 6 weeks ago, we on this call brought up that we were interested in CoreOS support. We actually brought that up in a cluster API meeting, and kind of after some back and forth, decided to kind of start that work within the provider, and then later bring that up. And I just wanted to say on this call that we're going to start diving into that. So there's going to be a lot of either PRs or proposals kind of coming up from our side for how things like that could work. And I just wanted to say that on the call so that everybody here was aware that we were going to start jumping into that.
If you do have like extensive changes, I would prefer to have a proposal, like a slight demo, so that we can get some feedback on it before starting coding. That's all I have to say.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, it sounds fine.
Yeah. And next item is Ashish for is node joined.
Yeah, so Andrew or Seth had opened a bug where the method was not doing what was not behaving as expected under certain scenarios, and I have a PR out to fix that. I think I think Jason and Chuck have looked at it, and I also think Vince, you have also looked at it. But what I wanted to discuss is like long term with like the node life cycle and work stream. Like where do we see this going, and like what is the timeline? Like will this continue to belong, or will we want it to belong in this repo, or do we want it to belong upstream? And like what is the timeline for that, or is that too soon for us to like have talk about it?
So
I wouldn't move it upstream yet.
Sorry?
I was gonna say, like, I wouldn't move it upstream yet, given the work that we've been doing on the data types, but I would like definitely add the use cases for it. So that when we actually go into implementation detail, which I believe this should probably be control plane lifecycle management, or actually this could be a reference implementation.
Okay, yeah, this is not just control plane, but this also handles any like worker nodes as well. So I think somebody else, yeah, go ahead.
In the new proposal, like if things work out like as we're thinking, there will be like the control plane will manage its own machine. So like it wouldn't, like you already know that those machine would either be like you already know like if you have one machine and that should be the first control plane, and if you join the others. But for worker nodes, it's always going to be a join.
Yeah.
But there is a distinction in the new world if we get it there. But yeah, I think this could totally be a reference implementation later on.
Okay. And
Jason,
I
were you
think
going to say something on?
somebody else was trying to say something.
I was just going to say it's probably way too early to know a timeline, just because we're still hashing out the workstream proposals.
Yeah, that's fair.
All right. Does anybody else have any other items for today? Nope. All right.
Oh,
Let's
if
call it.
nobody else has, I have a weird request. I think I know. I've posted about this in the channel, and most folks may know. I don't have an AWS account anymore for me to test. So if somebody can set me up with a temporary AWS account that I can share, I promise to use it responsibly. So that would be awesome. So just wanted to get it out there. I did email, I did follow Chuck's suggestion of emailing Ihor from CNCF. He said the request has to come from like a SIG lead. So wanted to see if there's anybody out there that can help me out.
Yeah, I think Nishi had originally done the original request.
Yeah, and that account like got suspended, and I reached out to her, and she said this is not supported anymore, and she said she's not with AWS at the moment. Uh, so um,
Yeah.
I'm like looking for ideas.
So one avenue that you might have. Do you have the ability to attend the SIG AWS meetings?
Yes, I wanted to attend the May 3rd one, but it kind of slipped out of my calendar. So
That may be a good avenue to check with, but I'm happy to do some checking around in the background too to see if there's something that we can help set you up with.
okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah, I just know that we generally don't see a lot of participation from AWS folks in this meeting who would have the ability to easily generate an account like that. And there should be somebody in the SIG AWS meeting that might be able to make that happen a little bit faster.
Okay, I'll look at the SIG AWS channel and see if I see friendly faces there and that people who might know me. So
Yeah.
I might make that approach.
All right.
All right, thank you.
Yep. All right. If there isn't anything else, then I think we can call it for today. Thank you, everybody.